Hello friends, nice to meet you again. Hopefully, you are healthy, long life, successful and happy always. This time we again remember a very influential figure in the world. Who is he? This is the story, enjoy watching.
Well, this is the beginning of the story. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, born July 18, 1918, died December 5, 2013, was a South African anti-apartheid revolutionary and politician who served as President of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. He was the first black South African to hold office and the first president to be elected by full representation, in a multiracial election. His government focused on removing the effects of apartheid by eradicating racism, poverty and inequality, and promoting racial reconciliation. An African nationalist and democratic socialist, he served as president of the African National Congress (ANC) from 1991 to 1997. In addition, Mandela was Secretary General of the Non-Aligned Movement from 1998 to 1999. Born into the Themba royal family and of Xhosa ethnicity, Mandela studied law at Fort Hare University and the University of the Witwatersrand. While living in Johannesburg, he became involved in anti-colonial politics, joined the ANC, and became a founding member of the ANC Youth League. After the Afrikaner nationalists of the National Party came to power in 1948 and adopted apartheid policies, Mandela's popularity skyrocketed in the ANC's defiance campaign in 1952, was elected president of the ANC Transvaal, and attended the 1955 Congress of the People. As a lawyer, he was repeatedly arrested for his activities. Incited and, as chairman of the ANC, was tried in the Treason Court from 1956 to 1961, but was ultimately found not guilty. Despite initially demonstrating non-violently, he and the South African Communist Party founded the militant Umkhonto we Sizwe, MK, in 1961 and led a campaign of bombing government targets. In 1962, he was arrested and charged with sabotage and conspiring to overthrow the government, and was sentenced to life imprisonment at the Rivonia Court. Mandela was born on July 18, 1918 in the village of Mvizo in Umtata, then located in the Cape Province, South Africa. By his first name Rolihlahla, a Xhosa term meaning troublemaker, he would later be better known by his clan name, Madiba. His father's great-grandfather, Ngubengcuka, was the ruler of the Themba tribe in the Transkei territory of what is today the Eastern Cape Province of South Africa. One of his sons, Mandela, became Nelson's grandfather and the source of his last name. Since Mandela was the only son of the king whose mother was from the Xiba clan, the Left-Hand dynasty, the descendants of the cadet branch of the royal family were morganatic, meaning that they were not entitled to inherit the throne but were recognized as members of the royal council whose positions were hereditary. Therefore, his father, Gadla Henry Mfakaniiswa, was a local tribal chief and member of the royal council. He was sworn in 1915 after his predecessor was accused of corruption by a white judge in power at the time. In 1926, Gadla was also accused of corruption and Nelson was later told that his father had been fired for insisting on refusing the judge's unreasonable demands. A devotee of the god Kamada, Gadla was a polygamist with 4 wives, 4 sons and 9 daughters, living in several villages. Nelson's mother, Nosekeni Fanny, was Gadla's 3rd wife who was the daughter of Nkedema of the Right-Hand dynasty and a member of the Mpemvu clan, saying his early life was dominated by customs, rituals and taboos. Mandela grew up with his 2 sisters in his mother's kraal in the village of Kunu, where Mandela worked as a cowherd and spent time with other children. Obedient Christian. His mother sent Mandela to a local Methodist school when he was 7 years old. Baptized as a Methodist, Mandela was given the English first name Nelson by his teachers. When Mandela was about 9 years old, his father settled in Kunu and died of an unknown disease which Mandela believed to be a lung disease. Feeling neglected, he later admitted to inheriting a proud rebellious nature and a strong sense of justice from his father. His mother took Mandela to the Great Place Palace in Kekaswini, where he was entrusted with the care of the Themba regent, Chief Janjantaba Dalingibo. Although he would not see his mother again for many years, Mandela felt that Janjantaba and his wife Noengland treated him like their own, raising him with their sons and daughters Justice and Namafu. Because Mandela often attended Mass every Sunday with his foster parents, Christianity became a major part of his life. He was educated at the Methodist Mission School near the palace. There he studied English, Xhosa, history, and geography. He became interested in African history, listened to stories told by old palace visitors, and was influenced by Chief Joy's anti-imperialist rhetoric. At that time, he still regarded European colonialists as helpers, not oppressors. At the age of 16, he, Justice, and their friends went to Taihalara to undergo a circumcision ritual which symbolically marked them as adults. After the ritual, Mandela was given the name Dalibunga. In order to acquire the skills to become a member of the advisory board for the Themba royal family, Mandela received secondary education at the Clarkberry Boarding Institute in Nkobo, a Western-style institution that is the largest black African school in Thembaland. Designed for his students to socialize with each other on a daily basis, he claims losing his closed-off attitude and making good friends with women for the first time. He started sports and pioneered his love of gardening. After completing a 2-year junior certificate, in 1937 he moved to Healdtown, a Methodist college in Fort Beaufort where most of the members of the Themba royal family, including Justice. The principal emphasized the superiority of culture and government. England, however, Mandela became increasingly interested in indigenous African culture and made friends for the first time with a non-Xhosa, a Sotho speaker, and was influenced by one of his favorite teachers, a Xhosa who broke the taboo by marrying a Sotho. Apart from spending his spare time running and boxing, in his sophomore year Mandela decided to become prefect. With Janjantaba's help, Mandela earned a Bachelor of Arts, BA, at the University of Fort Hare, an elite black institution in Alice, Eastern Cape with approximately 150 students. There he studied English, anthropology, politics, indigenous governance, and Roman Dutch law in his freshman year, and wanted to become a translator or clerk in the Department of Indigenous Affairs. Mandela settled in the Wesley House dormitories, befriended Oliver Tambo and his fellow tribesman, K.D. Matanzima. Continuing his interest in sports, Mandela took ballroom dance classes, and was involved in staging plays about Abraham Lincoln. As a member of the Students' Christian Association, he conducted gospel classes for the local community and became a supporter of Great Britain when the Second World War broke out. Although his friends had ties to the African National Congress (ANC) and the anti-imperialist movement, Mandela did not want to get involved. After helping set up a house committee for first-year students against the dominance of second-year students, at the end of his freshman year he became involved in the Students' Representative Council (SRC) boycott of food quality, resulting in him being temporarily suspended from the university. He left college without a degree while studying law at the University of the Witwatersrand. Mandela was the only native African on the faculty, and despite the face of racism he befriended a number of Liberal and communist European, Jewish, and Indian students, including Joe Slovo, Harry Schwartz, and Ruth First. After joining the ANC, Mandela was increasingly influenced by Sisulu and spent time with other activists at Sisulu's Orlando home, including his old friend Oliver Tambo. In 1943, Mandela met Anton Lembede, an African nationalist who strongly opposed a unified racial front against colonialism and imperialism or alliances with communists. Despite being friends with non-blacks and communists, Mandela supported Lembede's views, believing that black Africans should completely free in the struggle for political self-determination. Sensing the need for a youth wing to mobilize the African population on a large scale against their oppression, Mandela joined the delegation that informed ANC President Alfred Bitini Xuma of the plan at his home in Sophiatown. The African National Congress Youth League (ANCYL) was founded on Easter Sunday 1944 at the Bantu Men's Social Center on Aloft Street. Lembede became president and Mandela became a member of the executive committee. At Sisulu's house, Mandela met Evelyn Mays, an ANC activist and nurse from Nkobo, Transkei. Married on October 5, 1944, after initially living with Evelyn's relatives, they rented house number 8115 in Orlando in early 1946. Their first child, Madiba Thembi Thembekile, was born in February 1946, while a daughter named Makaziwe was born in 1947 but died 9 months later of meningitis. Lived with him. In early 1947, his 3-year tenure at Witkin, Seidelsky and Edelman ended and he decided to become a full-time student, relying on loans from the Bantu Welfare Trust. In July 1947, Mandela rushed Lembede to the hospital, where he died. Lembede was succeeded as president of ANCYL by the more moderate Peter MDA, who agreed to work with communists and non-blacks alike. MDA appointed Mandela as secretary of ANCYL. In December 1947, Mandela did not agree with MDA's approach to supporting efforts to expel communists from ANCYL, because their ideology was deemed un-African. This attempt proved a failure. In 1947, Mandela was elected to the executive committee of the ANC Transvaal under regional president C.S. Ramahano. When Ramahano acted against the wishes of the Transvaal Executive Committee by cooperating with Indians and communists, Mandela was one of those who forced him to resign. In the 1948 South African general election, where only whites were allowed to participate, Daniel Francois Malan's predominantly Afrikaner Herenigde Nasionale Party won and merged with the Afrikaner Party to become the National Party. Being openly racist, the party legalized and expanded racial segregation through the new apartheid laws. As his influence grew in the ANC, Mandela and his cadres began calling for direct action against apartheid, such as boycotts and strikes, influenced by the tactics of the South African Indian community. Xuma did not support this action and was removed from the presidency by a vote of no confidence and replaced by James Moroka and a more militant cabinet consisting of Sisulu, MDA, Tambo, and Godfrey Pitch. Mandela later said that, "We have now guided the ANC on a more radical and revolutionary path." Devoting his time to politics, Mandela failed in his final year 3 times at the Witwatersrand. His title was finally on hold in December 1949. On July 30, 1952, Mandela was arrested under the Combating Communism Act and tried as part of 21 defendants including Moroka, Sisulu, and Dudu in Johannesburg. Found guilty of statutory communism, their 9-month forced labor sentence was extended to 2 years. It becomes impractical. The defiance campaign is gradually ending. In September 1953, Andrew Kunena read Mandela's "No Easy Walk to Freedom" speech at an ANC Transvaal meeting. Its title is taken from a quote from Indian independence leader Jawaharlal Nehru, who later influenced Mandela's thinking. This speech set out a contingency plan in case the ANC was disbanded. The Mandela Plan or M-Plan consisted of dividing the organization into a cell structure with more centralized leadership. Mandela found work as a barrister for the firm Terblanche and Briggish before moving to the liberal Hellman and Michel and passing qualification tests to become a full-fledged barrister. In August 1953, Mandela and Oliver Tambo opened their own law firm, Mandela and Tambo, operating in downtown Johannesburg. As the only African-owned law firm in the country, it was popular with black people who felt aggrieved and often handled cases of police brutality. Out of favor with the authorities, the firm was forced to relocate to a remote location after its incorporation permit was revoked under the Group Areas Act. As a result, their service users are shrinking. Although the second daughter, Makaziwe Fumia, was born in May 1954, Mandela's relationship with Evelyn was strained and Evelyn accused him of cheating. Evidence emerged that he had an affair with ANC member Lillian Ngoyi and Secretary Ruth Mompati. Strong claims but without evidence indicate Mompati had children with Mandela. Disgusted by her son's behavior, Nosekini returns to Transkei, while Evelyn embraces Jehovah's Witnesses and opposes Mandela's political obsession. Disguised as a driver, Mandela toured South Africa in secret and organized the ANC's new cell structure and a mass strike on May 29. Dubbed the Black Pimpernel, in the media citing Emma Ortzi's 1905 novel The Scarlet Pimpernel, the police issued a warrant for his arrest. Mandela held several secret meetings with journalists, and after the government failed to prevent the strike, he warned them that many anti-apartheid activists were turning to violence. Through groups such as Poco Pack, he believed that the ANC should form an armed group to channel its violent actions and convinced the ANC chairman Albert Luthuli, who was morally opposed to violence, and allied activist groups of the need for it. Inspired by Fidel Castro's July 26 movement in the Cuban Revolution, in 1961 Mandela co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, abbreviated MK, with Sisulu and communist Joe Slovo. While serving as leader of this militant group, he got a number of ideas from the illegal literature on guerrilla warfare by Mao and Che Guevara. After being officially separated from the ANC, in the following years MK became the armed wing of the group. Most of the MK's early members were white communists. After hiding in Wolfie Kodesh's flat in Berea, Mandela moved to the communist-owned Liliesleaf farm in Rivonia and joined Raymond Mlaba, Slovo, and Bernstein, who both drafted the Constitutional Court's constitution. Against governments with minor casualties, bombing military installations, power plants, telephone lines, and transport lines at night when there are no civilians. Mandela noted that if these tactics failed, the court would turn to guerrilla warfare and terrorism. Shortly after ANC leader Luthuli won the Nobel Peace Prize, the court announced their presence to the public and plans for 57 bombings on Dingane Day, December 16, 1961, followed by other attacks on New Year's Eve. On August 5, 1962, police arrested Mandela and Cecil Williams near Howick. Detained at Marshall Square Prison, Johannesburg, he was charged with inciting a labor strike and leaving the country without a permit. Representing himself accompanied by Slovo as legal counsel, Mandela wanted to use this trial to demonstrate the ANC's moral opposition to racism, while his supporters protested outside the court. After being transferred to Pretoria, where Winnie could reach, Mandela began studying correspondence to earn his degree. Bachelor of Laws, LLB, from the University of London from inside his cell. His hearing began on October 15, but he disrupted the trial by wearing the traditional kaross, refusing to call witnesses, and turning his plea for leniency into a political speech. Found guilty, Mandela was sentenced to 5 years in prison. As he exited the courtroom, his supporters sang Nkosi Cycle I Africa. On July 11, 1963, the police searched Lilialsleaf Farm, detained everyone there, and confiscated MK's activity files, some of which mention Mandela by name. The Rivonia trial was immediately held at the Pretoria Supreme Court on October 9. Mandela and his associates were accused 4 times of sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. Chief Prosecutor Percy Yutar demanded the death penalty. Judge Quartus de Wet closed the prosecutor's case on the grounds that there was insufficient evidence, but Yutar rearranged his charges and filed a new case from December to February 1964 involving 173 eyewitnesses and thousands of documents and photographs. Except for James Cantor, who was found not guilty on all charges, Mandela and the other defendants admitted to sabotage but refused to ever agree to wage guerrilla warfare against the government. They asserted their political goals in this court. One of Mandela's speeches, inspired by Castro's "History Will Absolve Me" speech, received massive press coverage despite government censorship. The trial received international attention. Many parties around the world called for the release of the defendants, including the United Nations and the World Peace Council. The University of London Union called for Mandela to be president, and an evening mass for him was held at St. Paul's Cathedral, London. Reluctantly, being considered communist intruders, the South African government ignored the demands, and on June 12, 1964, de Wet sentenced Mandela and 2 of the defendants to 4 charges and sentenced him to life imprisonment instead of the death penalty. In April 1982, Mandela was transferred to Pollsmoor Prison in Tokai, Cape Town, with senior ANC leaders Walter Sisulu, Andrew Mlangeni, Ahmed Kathrada, and Raymond Mwaba. They believe they are being isolated to erase their influence over young activists. Conditions on Pollsmoor were better than on Robben Island, but Mandela missed the camaraderie and the view of the island. Befriending the chief warden of Pollsmoor, Brigadier Monroe, Mandela was allowed to create a roof garden, and read aloud and receive 52 letters a year. He was appointed patron of the multiracial movement United Democratic Front, UDF, which was founded to fight the reforms of the government of South African President P.W. Botha. Botha's National Party government allowed Klurling and Indian citizens to elect their own representatives who would manage education, health and housing, but black Africans were excluded from the system. Like Mandela, UDF sees this as an attempt to break up the anti-apartheid movement in the racial sector. Violence across the country is increasing. Many people worry about civil war breaking out. Under pressure from the international lobby, multinational banks stopped investing in South Africa, resulting in economic stagnation. Several banks and Thatcher demanded Botha release Mandela at the height of his international fame to defuse this unstable situation. Despite deeming Mandela a dangerous, big Marxist, in February 1985 Botha offered his release from prison on the condition that he unconditionally rejects violence as a political weapon. Mandela rejected this and released a statement through his daughter, Zinzi, that "What freedoms are being offered to me if the People's Organization, ANC, remains banned? Only free people can negotiate. A prisoner cannot be involved in a deal." In 1985, Mandela underwent surgery on an enlarged prostate before being placed in a new solitary cell downstairs. He met 7 key people, the international delegation sent to negotiate a settlement, but the Botha government refused to cooperate. In June of that year, the government declared a state of emergency and allowed the police to quell the riots. Anti-apartheid rebels fight. the ANC carried out 231 attacks in 1836 and 235 attacks in 1987. With ground troops and right-wing paramilitaries to fight the rebels, the government secretly funded the Zulu nationalist movement, Inkatha, to attack ANC members, which then exacerbated the violence. Mandela requested a discussion with Botha but was refused, instead meeting secretly with Justice Minister Kobe Coetsee in 1987, then meeting again 11 times over 3 years. Coetsee managed negotiations between Mandela and a team of 4 government officials from May 1988. The team agreed to release political prisoners and ratify the ANC on the condition that they would no longer resort to violence, break with the Communist Party, and not impose majority rule. Mandela rejected all of them and insisted that the ANC would only end the armed insurgency if the government stopped the violence. Mandela's 70th birthday in January 1988 attracted international attention. The BBC held a Nelson Mandela 70th birthday tribute music concert at Wembley Stadium, London. Despite being made a heroic figure worldwide, he faces personal problems when ANC leaders inform him that Winnie is the head of a criminal gang, Mandela United Football Club, which is responsible for torturing and killing opponents including children in Soweto. Although many people forced Mandela to divorce him, he remained faithful until Winnie was found guilty by the court, recovering from tuberculosis caused by damp cell conditions. In December 1988, Mandela was transferred to Victor Verster prison near Paarl. Here, he lives in a more comfortable warden's house with a private chef. Mandela used it to complete his LLB studies. Allowed by many visitors, Mandela made secret communications with exiled ANC leader Oliver Tambo. In 1989, Botha suffered a stroke, remained president but stepped down as chairman of the National Party and was succeeded by the conservative F.W. de Klerk. Unexpectedly, Botha invited Mandela to tea in July 1989. Mandela called it a warm invitation. Botha was succeeded as president by de Klerk 6 weeks later. The new president believed apartheid was unsustainable and released all ANC detainees unconditionally except for Mandela. After the fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989, de Klerk summoned his cabinet to discuss legalizing the ANC and releasing Mandela. Although some cabinet members strongly opposed his plans, de Klerk met with Mandela in December to discuss the situation, a meeting the two men considered friendly, before releasing Mandela unconditionally and ratifying all political parties that had previously been dissolved on February 2, 1990. After leaving Victor Verster on February 11, Mandela took Winnie by the hand before the crowd and the press. The event was broadcast live worldwide. At Cape Town Town Hall, he delivered a speech expressing his commitment to peace and reconciliation with the white minority, but stressed that the armed insurgency of the ANC was not over and would continue as a pure defensive action against the atrocities of apartheid. He hopes the government will agree to negotiations so that armed insurgency is no longer necessary, and insists that his main focus is on bringing peace to the black majority and giving them voting rights in national and local elections. While staying at Desmond Tutu's house a few days later, Mandela met friends, activists and the press, and addressed 100,000 people in Soccer City, Johannesburg. With elections set for April 27, 1994, the ANC began campaigning, opening 100 election posts, and hiring advisor Stanley Greenberg. Greenberg laid the foundation for people's forums across the country, so that Mandela could perform. Despite being a poor public speaker, Greenberg was a well-known figure of high status among the black population of South Africa. ANC campaigns for the Reconstruction and Development Program, RDP, which is a program to build 1 million houses in 5 years, create universal free education, and expand access to clean water and electricity. The party's slogan is, "A Better Life for All." although it is not clear where the funding will come from. Apart from the Weekly Mail and New Nation, the South African press opposed Mandela's candidacy, feared ethnic conflict, and supported the National Party or Democratic Party. Mandela spent a lot of time raising funds for the ANC, traveling around North America, Europe and Asia meeting wealthy donors, including former supporters of the apartheid regime. He also proposed reducing the voting age from 18 to 14. After being rejected by the ANC, this policy became a laughingstock. Worried that COSAG would destabilize the election, especially in the aftermath of the Battle of Bop and the Shell House Massacre, respectively, the violence involving the AWB and Inkatha, Mandela met several Afrikaner politicians and generals, including P.W. Botha, Pik Botha, and Constant Viljoen, persuaded them to join the democratic system, and de Klerk convinced Buthelezi of Inkatha to run for elections instead of waging a separatist war. As leaders of the two major parties, de Klerk and Mandela appeared on television debates. Although de Klerk was widely regarded as the best speaker at the event, Mandela's offer to shake hands took him by surprise, leading many commentators to consider Mandela the winner. Elections took place with little violence, including an AWB cell car bomb that killed 20 people. Mandela voted at Orange High School in Durban, and despite being president-elect, he publicly admitted that the election was full of fraud and sabotage. With 62% of the national vote, the ANC was just a little off the two-thirds majority needed to amend the constitution. The ANC also won in 7 provinces, while Inkatha and the National Party 1 province each. Mandela's inauguration took place in Pretoria on May 10, 1994, broadcast to 1 billion viewers worldwide. The event was attended by 4,000 guests, including world leaders from various backgrounds. Besides South Africa's first black president, Mandela was also the head of the ANC-dominated National Unity Government, which had no experience in government but also included representatives of the National Party and Inkatha. Under the previous agreement, de Klerk became first vice president, while Thabo Mbeki served as deputy for a second term. Although Mbeki was not his first choice for this post, Mandela became highly dependent on him throughout his reign and allowed Mbeki to draft policy details. After moving to the office of president at Tuinhuis in Cape Town, Mandela allowed de Klerk to remain in the presidential residence at Groot Schuur Castle, not at Westbrook Castle, which was renamed Genadendel, which means Valley of Relief in Afrikaans. Apart from defending his home in Houghton, he also built a house in his hometown, Kunu. He often visited Kunu, traveled there, met local residents, and resolved tribal disputes. At the age of 76, he was dealing with various ailments, and despite having enough energy, he felt isolated and left alone. He often entertained celebrities, such as Michael Jackson, Whoopi Goldberg, and the Spice Girls. He also befriended a number of wealthy businessmen such as Harry Oppenheimer of Anglo American, and the Queen of Great Britain Elizabeth II during her state visit to South Africa in March 1995, resulting in Mandela being criticized by anti-capitalists in the ANC. Despite the well-being of those around him, Mandela lived a simple life and donated a third of his annual salary of 552,000 rand to the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, which he founded in 1995. Despite speaking out loud in support of press freedom and making friends with many journalists, Mandela was critical of most of the media in his country. Because it was owned and operated by middle-class white residents and believed they were too focused on scaring the audience with crime news. After taking the presidency, Mandela changed clothes several times a day, and one of Mandela's trademarks was his batik shirt known as the Madiba shirt. He always wears it even in a formal setting. In December 1994, Mandela's autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, was finally published. In late 1994, he attended the 49th ANC conference in Bloemfontein. There the more militant national executives were elected, including Winnie Mandela. Although Winnie was interested in a reconciliation, Nelson began the divorce proceedings in August 1995. In 1995, he entered into a relationship with Graca Machel, a Mozambican political activist who is 27 years younger and the widow of former President Samora Machel. They first met in July 1990 when Machel was still grieving, but their friendship blossomed into lovers. Machel often accompanies Mandela on his overseas visits. He turned down Mandela's first marriage proposal because he wanted to be freer and be able to divide his time between Mozambique and Johannesburg. The new South African constitution was approved by Parliament in May 1996. This constitution establishes a series of institutions to oversee political and administrative powers within the framework of a constitutional democracy. De Klerk continued to oppose the adoption of this constitution and withdrew from the coalition government in protest. The ANC took over cabinet posts previously held by the National Party. Mbeki became the sole vice president. If one day Mandela and Mbeki were abroad, Buthelezi was appointed interim president. This indicates an improvement in the relationship between him and Mandela. Mandela resigned as president of the ANC at the December 1997 conference, and while hoping that Ramaphosa would succeed him, the ANC elected Mbeki as president. Mandela admitted that by then Mbeki had become the de facto president of the country. Replacing Mbeki as vice president, Mandela and the executive backed the candidacy of Jacob Zuma, a Zulu who was briefly imprisoned on Robben Island, but was challenged by Winnie, whose populist rhetoric earned him a large following within the party. Zuma defeated him by a landslide in the election. Mandela's relationship with Machel intensified. In February 1998 he declared that "I am in love with a wonderful woman," and under pressure from his best friend Desmond Tutu, who forced him to become a role model for young people, he married Mandela's 80th birthday in July. The next day, he had a big party attended by several foreign guests. Mandela never planned to run for a second term and delivered his valedictorian on March 29, 1999. After that he retiring in June 1999, Mandela chose a quiet family life, divided between Johannesburg and Kunu. He wanted to write a sequel to his autobiography, The Presidential Years, but was abandoned before publication. Finding life on his own was difficult. He turned to a busy public life with a daily program of tasks, met with world leaders and celebrities, and in Johannesburg worked with the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which was founded in 1999 to focus on eradicating HIV/AIDS, rural development and development. School. Despite being criticized for failing to do what he could to prevent the outbreak during his reign, he spent much of his time on the issue after his retirement and called it a war that killed more than previous wars. He also asked the Mbeki government to ensure that South Africans infected with HIV+ get the retrovirus. In 2000, the Nelson Mandela Invitational Charity Golf Tournament was hosted by Gary Player. Mandela successfully recovered from prostate cancer in July 2001. In 2002, Mandela inaugurated the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture, and the Mandela Rhodes Foundation was formed in 2003 at Rhodes House, University of Oxford, to provide postgraduate scholarships to African students. These projects were followed by the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory and the 46664 campaign against HIV/AIDS. He gave a closing address at the 13th International AIDS Conference in Durban in 2000, and in 2004, he spoke at the 15th International AIDS Conference in Bangkok, Thailand. In February 2011, he was hospitalized for a respiratory infection, before being readmitted for a lung infection and gallstone removal in December 2012. After successful medical procedures in early March 2013, his lung infection recurred and he was rushed to the hospital. Sick in Pretoria. On June 8, 2013, his lung infection worsened and he was rushed back to Pretoria Hospital in serious condition. After 4 days, it was reported that he was stable and was in a serious but stable condition. On the way to the hospital, his ambulance broke down and was stuck on the side of the road for 40 minutes. The South African government was criticized for the incident after confirming its report a few weeks later, but President Jacob Zuma countered that there were 7 doctors in the convoy who were in complete control of the situation at that time. He received medical treatment from experts. On June 22, 2013, CBS News stated that he had not opened his eyes in days and was unresponsive, and his family discussed how much medical intervention should be given. On June 23, 2013, President Jacob Zuma released a statement that Mandela's condition was becoming increasingly critical. Zuma, accompanied by the Vice President of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, met Mandela's wife Graca Machel at the hospital in Pretoria and discussed her condition. On June 25, Cape Town Archbishop Thabo Makgoba visited Mandela in hospital and prayed with Graca Machel Mandela at this difficult time of watching and waiting. The next day, Zuma visited Mandela and cancelled the next day's visit to Mozambique. Mandela's relatives told the Daily Telegraph that he was on a life support machine. On December 5, 2013, Mandela died at the age of 95. He died at 8:50 p.m. local time at his home in Houghton, Johannesburg, surrounded by his family. Zuma publicly announced his death on television. Mandela's body was laid to rest on December 11 to 13 at the Union Buildings and a state funeral was held on December 15 in Kunu. Mandela's $4.1 million home was handed over to his wife, other family members, staff and educational institutions.
So that's a little story. Hopefully it will be an inspiration and motivation for all of us, of course, add insight and make us know and get smarter. Keep up with the next inspirational stories only at @DHE_A. Thank you very much for watching. Welcome to meet again. Bye bye.